Good morning, everybody. So let us start our lecture. And okay, before I start, let us see our schedule. So in your test 3, so we will have module 7 part 1, one-dimensional array, okay, up to one-dimensional array. Maybe on Friday or next week we will start discussing array. Okay, so in your test 3, we will cover one-dimensional array also, okay? So part of module 7. So do not be confused, please. It says module 7. So after test, we will cover two-dimensional array. Okay, so today I will mainly discuss test review questions, but for the first 15 minutes, I want to discuss something about static modifier. So for the first 15 minutes, okay, no device open, please. Okay, please give attention for the first 15 minutes. Okay, we were discussing a class, dog class, right? How to create a class. A class is a user-defined data type, or sometimes we say it is a custom data type, or you say blueprint or a structure of object. Actually, our class says how our object will look like. Okay, it is the structure of our object. So one thing that you see, you have noticed that there in our main method, we say our main method is static. So static is a modifier, okay, is an important aspect, but you will learn more about static in the next course. But I want to give a startup in case if you get any question, why do we need to make it static, and why what are the benefits of having static modifier? Okay, so static modifier usually you see that what do? We access the methods of a class or any fields of a class by creating an object of that class. For instance, here is my dog class. So in my main method, we created dog instance or dog object, and then we access the method. For instance, this is the constructor or any method. This is display method, by using the object with dot operator, right? This is a convention that we will call or use or access an attribute of a class, or like either a variable or field or any method or function by using the dot operator with the object of a class. This is the convention. Okay, so by this way, what do? We call, for instance, display method. We are calling display method for D1 only, and here we are calling display method for D2 only, and here we are calling display method for D3 only. So by this way, D1 will display only its own attributes, and by this way, D2 will display its own attribute. Okay, and by this way, D3 will display its own attribute. This is convention. Okay, but sometime, for instance, we may need to use some common attributes that will be same value, that may contain same value or do the same behavior for all objects in a class. Then we use static modifier. For instance, I know that for all of you students over here, you are a student of Kansas State University, right? So if I ask each of you, for any data entry or any record keeping or for any purpose, if I ask you what is your college name or university name, and what is your university name, what is your university name, what is your university name, you will give me same answer, right? Kansas State University. That I know that for all object, for all students of this class or this university, everybody has institution name or college name or university name same, right? So it will be redundant to ask same question again for each of the individual object while I am getting same answer, right? So instead of asking same questions again and again all individual object, we want to use a common field that will hold the common attribute, right? This will be good, right? So in that purpose we can use static modifier. So another advantage is that if an attribute is static, then we do not need to call that static modifier by using dot operator with object. This fashion we don't need to call, because this, for instance, if my display method would be a static method, so display method would be same for all objects. So then I don't need to call d1.display, d2.display, d3.display. Instead of, I can say dog.display. For all objects I have same, right? That is the purpose, to simplify our coding. Okay, so let us do an example. For instance, if I have a public static int count, I have a count field. I want to use that count field in order to keep track of how many objects I am creating for this dog. Okay, so initially if I want to count it, initially I can put 0. So as long as if I say public static int count equal to 0, then this count variable will be applicable for all objects in this class. So now later if I say whenever I create an instance of dog instance, whenever I create a dog instance, if I say count plus plus, that means whenever I am creating a dog object, I am increasing my count. I'm creating one dog object, I am increasing the count by 1. Okay, this is why I said count plus plus. Okay, or even also here in there, wherever I have constructor, I want to make it increase the count variable. Okay, so then for instance, let me put it in the constructors also. Then how many objects I have created over here. So at all the way end, let us see, no matter how many objects I have created, if I do a statement like this, total dog object created will be, I need to use the count, right? I use a count variable to keep track how many dog objects I have created. So then in case this, instead of using this count, so if I want to use this, that is showing me an error. It says count cannot be resolved as a variable. Actually count is defined where? In the class dog, right? So since count is defined as a static, you see, as a static modifier, then I will use dog.count. Maybe you can see. I'm sorry. See, this dog.count, you see that if I run this program, let me show my output. I have to see the all the way end. You see, total dog object created 5. No matter how I created using my default constructor or argumented constructor. How many at the all the way end? If I see total, I have created 1 2 3, and later maybe I have created 5. I have created 6. So if I run this, you will say D2 object created. Maybe I have created total 5 dog instances. So one of the use of static modifier is that we can keep track of how many total objects are being created for our class. Okay, so here once a field is static, we cannot call it by D1 name. We can call it by D1 name. You say that if I call it D1.count and D2.count, so then let me see what it is not showing me an error message, but this is not a good way to call. It is showing me an error warning message. It says that the static field dot.count should be accessed in a static way. It is showing me the error warning message that the static field dog.count should be accessed in a static way. So what is static way? Static way that I should call a static field by calling with its class name, not with its field name, because the static modifier is an asset or an attribute that is same or applicable for all instances of this class. And another thing is that if it is within class, then we do not need to create an object of this class in order to call a static method. But if it is outside the class or in another class, then we need to use class name dot. So since my main method, now recall my main method, since my main method is called, I am calling my main method within this class. So usually my main method is defined within dog main class, right? So if there was no option to make this main method static, then what I would need to do? I would need to create a main dog, like this object, an object of this class, and I need to call this main method by that object. For instance, I would need to call an instant main dog md equal to new main dog, and I need to use md dot main like this. I was supposed to call main like this way, but since I made the compiler is developed with that way that main method is always static, so that we do not need to create an object of this class where the main method is located to call that main method. So otherwise main method is created as a driver, so we can call this main method directly. It's executing directly. Okay, so this is one use of the static modifier. So once a member is static, that is global, that is called global or common, actually common to all field, all objects of this kind. You will learn in depth or more about static modifier in our next course, or if you study more yourself. So one thing is that a static modifier is called by its class name. How do I remember that? How do you remember that? I usually learn this through a story. When I wrote my book, I wrote this. So usually, in this world, there are some people who are well known or famous people worldwide, right? For instance, if we say Barack Obama, so then everybody understand that he was mentioning the former president of United States. Even maybe there are hundreds or thousands people whose name is Barack Obama worldwide, right? But if I say Barack Obama of USA, then people will be sure that, okay, I'm mentioning the former US president, right? So since he is a famous person, say he goes by the country name, right, or nation name. So similarly, since my count is a static variable defined in my dog class, so it has some honor. Okay, highest priority. That what? How do we access this? We say that count of dog class. Okay, so for instance, if I do not say this, for instance, when I say count.dog, then what I got here, how many total objects created? 5. So every time I am creating an object, I increased my count object by 1, either by using what is that called, default constructor or any constructor. So for instance, now if I do not say static, what happens? Let us see. If I get rid of static modifier, and then if I cannot call this, right? It's showing me an error because since my count is not static, so I cannot call this way. So there is a way to resolve this. I can call d1.count, or similarly I can say d5.count. So let us run these two codes. Let us see what happens. It's so. Okay, so even if I created 5 objects, but still it is showing me my count equal to 1, because what is going over here. So once I say non-static or regular variable, every time I create my object, this count will be started from 0. Okay, so even if I do not even put 0 over here, it would say 0 or same value. Since I fetched 0, that every time I create, actually I should keep 0. Let us see 0. So every time, since if I do not use static, then what will happen? Every time I create an object, it will start from its beginning value. What is its beginning or default value? 0, right? So it will start from 0. Every time I create an object, dog object, it will increase count by 1, but starting from 0, because I put 0 over here. But if I keep track static, then will happen, it will remember the old value. Okay, you understand? If I say static, so it will remember the count will be, every time I use count, it will remember its old value. Okay, so this is how one of the use of. Now if I run this way, there is no error, but I'm calling non-static way. If I say that, whenever if I say, even if I say d1.count or d5.count or d3.count, then still it is showing me 5, right? Because the count is updating, it is showing my latest count value. So since my count is a static member, so it is showing me a warning message. It says that the static field dog count should be accessed in a static way. So what is static way? The static way that is that I need to call this static modifier by its name, class name, okay? By its class name. A static modifier is an asset, is a common asset of class that is applicable for all members, all instances of this class, not for an individual instance, okay? So another thing is that, another property is that in order to call or access a static modifier or sorry, a static attribute, the caller need to be static. Okay, here my main method is static, right? So I was able to call my static count inside my main, but if I wanted to do this in my display method, okay, if it is within class I can do this, but from other class I cannot do this, okay? But that is the advanced thing. I am not discussing right now in advance. So far you remember that we use a static field in order to make that common for all objects of a class. Okay, in order to access a static modifier, we call it by class name, not by object name. Okay. Another thing is that in order to call a static field, the caller needs to be static. I used to tell my student that, to remember it, that in order to be a friend of a president of a country, we need to be a president of another country or people of at least of that category, right? In order to call a or you say that there is a term convention that when you got a PhD degree, then you can call another PhD holder by his first name. This is a convention. But if you do not have a PhD, you cannot call anybody with a PhD degree by his first name. You have to say Dr. Hussain or something for me. But if you have a PhD, you can call me by my first name, Mukhtar. There is a convention. There is no hard-coded rule. There is a convention. So, for instance, the convention for static modifier is this, whatever I discussed. So, although these are not in slide, I like you to remember this and maybe do further study. Maybe you can face this issue. In your next course, you will learn more, okay, about static modifier. Anyone has any question? Yes.
What other thing, like what makes the dog static unlike the instances?
Dog is not static. Here my count is static.
Okay.
Dog is not static. My dog class is same. My count, because I want to make it same applicable for all instances.
Okay.
For instance, if I want to count how many dogs I'm creating. For instance, if university wants to count how many students have admitted, total, right? Or how many people browse this website? How many people downloaded this app? You see that whenever you want to download an app, it says that 5,000 downloaded, 1 million downloads, right? It keeps track using static variable. Okay, anyone has any other question? Yes.
So what are some other purposes for static other than just the count?
Other purposes, they mainly to make okay. Other purposes is that for instance, if what I want to do, if I declare a method as a static, then I do not need to, I can call this method directly. Maybe later in a later class I will show an example. Okay, if I have my, for instance, add class or this class, static, I do not need to call this for instance, let me do, if I say static, so I cannot do here. So if I say static over here, then for instance, I can call this method if it's within class directly without creating an object. Maybe your question is in advance. I need more time to display, to show an example. If I get time, then I can show you later. Anyone has any other question? Okay, that's if you do not have any question, I will upload my slide lecture and you can review it. And I have added these updates in my replit for C# and also for Java program, and I will update it for C++ as well as after my class. Okay, now if you don't have any question, I want to review old test questions. Anyone has any other question? Okay, so so please start practicing for the upcoming test, and you will see a significant number of test questions about class and object in your upcoming test. If you do not understand how to create a class or object, you will not be able to pass in this course. So let us say last time we saw test 3A fall, and let me see test 3A. Which one do you want? Anyone has any option? Okay, in my previous section this morning I discussed test 3A. Okay, I discussed test 3A class, so I want to quickly go with that one for 3A, then I will go to another section maybe. Okay, for spring 2019 3A was, the question was create a class with the name and variables attributes listed below. Okay, create a default constructor with no parameters that assign default values for each variables. Then create an overloaded constructor with one parameter for each variable. Finally, create a method that returns the total number of items in a storage container. Okay, let us go one by one, and this is a large question. Okay, our test developers, they spend some time to give you a question like a story. Okay, so you see that 50 points for one question. If you understand this, it will need 5 minutes to do this, but if you do not understand this, okay, so let us do one by one. So what do we need to do? So create a class with the name and variables or attributes listed below. So this is my, actually these are at below, this is mentioned. It refers that we need to create a class by name is piggy bank, and this will be class name and this will be our attributes name. Okay, so I'm writing pseudo code, okay, not actual code. So how do we create a class? We use class keyword, then class name piggy bank, and in most programming languages it starts with a curly brace. And okay, so I'm quickly going because I have discussed in detail in my previous section. So if you want to in detail, so please watch my video recorded for my previous section. Okay, so here these are the fields. Okay, quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. Okay, so we need to use this variable, we need to declare these variables, but what we need only one thing, to add data type, right, with it. So dimes, quarters, or nickels or pennies, what would be data type for this? we can say integer usually, right? How many dimes I have in my bank, or how many quarters I have, how many nickels I have, how many pennies I have. So I can say integer quarters. So then after that is semicolon. Most of the language is semicolon, right? And then instead of comma over here, I will say semicolon, right? And then integer dimes, integer nickels, integer pennies, and then other all the way in semicolon. And a class ends with a curly braces, and for C++ it ends also with a semicolon, right? C++ people know that. Okay, so this is the one line. Okay, I can save it in multiple lines, but since I use semicolon, I can say this. Okay, so this is the decoration of my class. Anyone has any question? Yes.
So that's just for C++?
No, so that I wrote in like I told that I'm writing code in maybe Java or common language.
Okay.
So if you will want to in C++, then put semicolon. So whenever even if you put semicolon or do not semicolon, put semicolon, our grader knows that you are putting C++ or normal Java.
Okay. So does it always have to start with a curly bracket and end with a curly bracket?
Yes, a class start with a class start with a curly brace, opening curly brace, and ends with a closing curly brace, right?
Yeah.
And these are my fields.
Okay.
Okay, usually when you type in, then you will have see that you will have more space, and then you can write one line after another. But in order to save my space, just I want it to this way. Okay, so let us see that next one. Create a default constructor with no parameter that assign default values for each variable. So what is a constructor? A constructor is a function defined in a class, right? Okay, so a constructor has same name of its class name, right? It does not return a value, it does not have a return type. So if I say public, that piggy bank, what is the symbol of constructor? You see that this is the symbol of constructor. This is a symbol of method, right? The opening and closing bracket, parenthesis, is a symbol of method. Okay, and then if my method name is exactly as a class name, then we call this method a constructor. Okay, so this is a public piggy bank. This is my constructor start, and this is a method. We need body. So then it says with no parameters, I did not put any parameter over here, and it says that assign default values for each variable. Default values, that it asks you to put some fixed values, hard-coded values. No matter what you put, it's your option. So you can put quarter equal to 4, dimes equal to 10, nickels equal to 20, pennies equal to 100, or whatever you like. Okay, and this is the end of my method body. Okay, this is as simple. Again, I discussed in detail in my previous section video. If you want to listen more in depth, then please watch previous lecture video. My previous lecture video is uploaded at so section 1, I teach in the morning, section 1. So this one. Okay, I discuss in detail. Okay, if you want to learn in detail, please watch this video. Otherwise, I'm going shortcut because I want to go another section video, another section questions for you. Okay, anyone has any questions so far? Okay, the next part, okay, let's see. Then create a overloaded constructor with one parameter of each variable. then I need another constructor, right, with some parameters, with one parameter of each variable. How many variables or fields we do have? 4, right? So I need another constructor that will have, I need another constructor, overloaded constructor, public piggy bank again, and within this parenthesis I will put all of this. The difference is here I need to put here in the right all thing that I can put from my class, but one thing that I have to get rid of the last parenthesis, last semicolon, and I have to replace by semicolon, this semicolon by comma. Okay, say integer, quarter, int dime, int nickel, int pennies, and you know that we need to link this with this, right? We need to link these arguments with this field or attributes, right? How do we link those? We use this keyword, right? This dot quarters equal to quarters, this dot dimes equal to dimes. Okay, since these are program statements, so ended with semicolon, and then this dot nickels equal to nickels, and this dot pennies equal to pennies. Okay, let us see the last one. Finally, create a method, okay, that returns the total number of items in the storage container. Storage container actually is my piggy bank. Yes.
I just want to make sure I got this right. Can you scroll that down for me, please? So whenever you say this quarters, that's saying that the quarters in the overload is pulling down the quarters from the previous instructor, right?
Previous constructor does not is different from this constructor. There is no link with the previous constructor. So when you call this constructor, whatever value you provide for quarters, that will be assigned to this quarter field. Yes.
So you have to have a default constructor if you don't use your default constructor ever?
Okay, so that is a good question. So if you define an argumented constructor, then some compilers or some programs need that you will define your default constructor first. Some compiler programs need that you will put default constructor, and for this case, in that case your default constructor can be empty, but in that case your default constructor is asking to assign some default values, whatever values you like. I will answer your question later, maybe the second part. Let me go to this. Okay, so this part it says create a method. We need a method that returns the total numbers of items in the storage container. Just we need total number items. What are my items over here? What are my items over here? Fields. What are my fields? Dimes, quarters, nickels, and pennies. So, okay, I need a method such as public. For instance, it will return any name I can give my method. For instance, item count. So what will I return? I will return quarters plus dimes plus nickels plus pennies. Whatever I have in total, I will return this. Okay, so then since this method is returning a type, I need its return type integer, right? So these are the number, right? Nickels. You cannot have 2.5 nickel, either 2 nickels or 3 nickels. Okay, so this let me one. It says create a method that returns the total number of items in the storage counter, and there is a note over here. It says restriction. This method must not print anything. Okay, let us understand this. What is this restriction? You cannot print anything. For instance, if you were asked to print this one, for instance, if you were asked to print the number of items, then you could say print, right? Print, it will print how many numbers you have. But in that case, if you print over there, then in that case you could display your item count with a method void, right? If you want to print over here, so then you could use return type void, but if you use void, then you cannot have return statement, right? Okay, but the question says this method must not print anything. That means it cannot have any print statement, right? We cannot have this statement. That means, and at the beginning it says it returns a value, returns the total numbers, right? So since you return, you should have a return type non-void, right? So it should be integer and then return. Anyone has any other question? Yes.
What would that return?
It is returning the total, how many quarters, dimes, nickels and pennies, whatever it has, it will return for this object.
I mean, like, would it print, what would the exact integer be, or is it just not defined?
Let me call this program. I will show you. Anyone has any other question? Let us see the second part, okay? This part, you see that this question is 70 point here, and the associate questions have another 30 points. So 80 points for one question. If you understand, then you can do it in 10 minutes. But if you do not understand, you can do it, right? So he said, let us see the last part, last two parts. He says, create two new objects of that class you just created. What class I just created? Piggy bank, right? I need to create two objects. Okay, one using the default constructor, another using the overloaded constructor. So if I want to use the default constructor, then what do you need to do? How can we create an object of this class? For instance, if I say 1, my first variable object name is 1. Someone says it in other section 1. So then piggy bank space 1 equal to new piggy bank, and I'm calling default constructor. So my constructor, I'm calling the empty constructor, right? So it will create an object name 1, okay, that will have how many quarters? 4 quarters. How many dimes? How many nickels? 20. And how many pennies? Yeah, in this case I selected this default. Whatever you set your default value, it will have that value, okay? And the second constructor, okay, so create another object using the overloaded constructor. Which one is my overloaded constructor here? This one, right? And in my overloaded constructor has arguments. I have to provide 4 arguments, right? 4 values, right? One for quarters, first one for quarters, second one for dimes, third one for nickels, and fourth one for pennies. So then how do I call that constructor, right? So this is the way in C++ and in C# and Java. Piggy bank, so if my object equal to 2, name equal to 2, okay, equal to new piggy bank. What is the difference over here? I need to call the argumented constructor. So when I call the argumented constructor, I need to provide values for each of the field, right? This one will go for dimes, this one will go for nickel, this one will go for quarters. First one is quarter, right? First one will go quarters, second one dimes, third one nickel, and fourth one pennies. So this one will go quarters, and this one will go dimes, this one for nickel, and this one for pennies, okay? And in C++ format, we don't need to use this part. We don't need to use the new operator. We just call piggy bank and then object name, and within parentheses we call this, right? And in C++ format, we will create like this, piggy1 equal to just like this. And this is Java and C# format. Okay, maybe I need 2 more minutes. Okay, you see that 50 plus 20, 70 points. There is 10 more points for this one. Okay, call me maybe. For each of the 2 objects, call the method that calculates the total number of items in each object. Okay, so how many objects I have created? 2, right? First object name is 1, and then how can I call the method that display that calculates the total numbers of item in each object? We can recall that our method name was item count, right? So whenever we call, say 1 dot item count, actually this time I can answer his left. Yes, some of his question. His question is that if I call item 1 dot item count, so what it will return? It will return me how many quarters I have? 4 plus 10, 14 plus 20, 34, right? Plus 100, 134. First one will return 134, and the second one, when I say okay item count, if I call the second one, then whatever values I provided over here when I created my object, 1 plus 3, 4 plus 4, 8 plus 5, 13. The second one will return me 13, and then first one will return me 134, right? We just calculated. So it has how many points? It has 10 points. So 10 points like this, just 5 points for each line. If you understand this, then you can do it. Okay, at this point I like everybody to do practice. If you do not practice, you will not be able to write your answer correctly. Okay, so please practice this, and in our next lecture we will discuss another test question. Okay, thank you so much.
Is there a test date on the schedule, like final? Like I can go ahead and schedule it?
Yeah, on the schedule, please.
Okay.
See on the schedule.
Okay, thank you.